Chapter 112. The train was a sleek unit full of uniformed henchmen and military soldiers, sitting stony-faced and anonymous, as though they were expendable automatons with no personalities or families or lives outside their unfathomable, top-secret government jobs. They reminded me of the private armies of Bond villains, all running around in their uniforms, helping bring about the destruction of the world. But what was in it for them, beyond the paycheck? How many holidays did they get a year, and what was the healthcare like? Did they get their dentistry paid for? Did they go home to the wife and kids? Did the plumbers who fitted the bidets and toilets in the secret volcano lair know what they were being used for? And what about the guy who fitted the hinges to the missile bay doors, where the rockets of doom would blast off to explode the moon and wreak havoc with the tides and destroy all the great coastal cities unless a huge, multi-billion-dollar ransom was paid? It must have cost a small fortune, all that island purchasing and running a private army and hush money and bombs. It makes you wonder why the baddies didn't just buy what they wanted with the money they already had in the first place and save all the hassle and inevitable comeuppance at the hands of the good guys. Although you can't deny a man a project and a dream, no matter how pointless and harebrained it might seem to others. Next stop, Exposition City, the female train voice said, and again it made me wonder about the woman who one day went into work and was asked to make recordings for the train schedule for Area 51, or the guys who made OJ's secret slide and underground palace. Not to mention, say, all the thousands of average Joes who worked on the moon landing hoaxes, doing the sound, the video editing, the cameras, the tea, or the guys who fit the aeroplanes with chemtrail stuff, even though they know it will be landing on their own houses and parents and children. And wasn't it amazing that not a single one of them involved in all these things ever once blew their whistles and spewed the beans? "So now we can talk," said OJ. I've forgotten what he sounds like again. "And I'm sure you have a million questions. But first, before we get into that, there's something important you have to do. You have to forget everything you thought you knew and everything I've ever told you to. I'm not saying none of it was true, but to be honest with you, there was quite a lot in there that was, well, shall we say, fabricated. It served a purpose for the time, such as getting you here, but beyond that, well, question everything is what I say. There's truth, and there's post-truth, and then there's false truth too. It's all true, really, but it's not all to be taken literally, if you catch my drift." I like how you said you'd spent the last 9 years fucking men's arses, and now you couldn't wait to get out of jail because you wanted to fuck girls' arses, I said. "Well, that," said OJ, that was one of those things I guess I don't want to talk about. Too complex to explain, too deep down the hole." He looked sheepishly around and checked the time on his watch. "But if the whole time you had a secret underground lair full of women, and booze, and beds..." I left it hanging in the air. "Yeah," he said, "exactly. Like I said, don't take everything literally. It's all smoke and mirrors. Reality is not what it seems, and not even what people imagine it to be in their wildest dreams. There's way more to it than meets the eye. And all will be revealed in good time, my friend. You can mark my words on that." He smiled at me and seemed satisfied with this, but it all seemed rather vague to me. "You even sound different," I said. "The way you're talking is not like it was at the beginning of the book." "This is my real voice," he said, and then added with a twinkle and a wink, "Or is it?" He laughed. The train pulled into a stop. A couple of henchmen got off and a bunch of stereotypical chatty secretary types got on. I guess even in secret shady organizations, someone's got to do the filing and the emails. "So why the jail thing?" I said. "Why the pretense of being sentenced to, what was it?" 33 years, he said. 33 years for armed robbery when you were actually living the high life in a veritable mansion with an underground train system that could take you to LA, the airport, a brothel/bathhouse, and Area 51. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, first of all, you'll notice the symbolism of the number. 33 is a hugely important number as far as the Illuminati and the occult is concerned. There are no coincidences with these things. Secondly, what better way to continue working on my projects with the government than to fool the public into thinking I was banged up in jail and unable to see the light of day, never mind tinker with it.
What do you mean, tinker with it? I said. OJ looked around and his voice grew to a whisper.
None of these people know about this. New secret project. But haven't you ever had the sense that time seems to be speeding up these days? That the years are passing faster? That the days and weeks of your youth seem way longer than they are now? Well, the truth is, they were. We've been playing with the speeds of the Earth's rotation and its orbit around the sun, as well as the size of the planet and the universe itself. And that's creating some interesting changes with our perception of time. Some people notice it, but the vast majority just dismiss it, tell others they're kooks, get on with their lives. Our people are such sheep. And I got to tell you, it's a lot of fun hurting you all. After all, once you got all the money you want, what else is there except power over others and getting them to do things, whether they want to or not? That's where the real joy is. That's getting into godlike territory right there.
I looked at OJ and noticed a bit of a mad glint in his eye. And then I saw him blink and realized he didn't blink like a normal human being. He blinked like a cat or a reptile or something, with some extra layer of skin underneath his eyelid. I did a double take, like some dog out of a cartoon, and he must have picked up on it because he asked me what I'd seen. Or maybe he asked me because he was telepathic and knew everything I was thinking. OJ, I said. I might as well say it since you seem to know what I'm thinking already, but are you one of those shape-shifting alien space lizards everyone keeps going on about?
Shh, he said, smiling at me. These guys don't know about that sort of thing. They're strictly level 1. Tighten the screws, push a few buttons. They have no clue what's happening upstairs, or should I say, downstairs. But yeah, if you must know, I am.
He blinked at me again, and for a split second I saw his real, genuine lizard eyes and what appeared to be a forked tongue in his mouth, peeking out as he smiled. He held his finger up to his lips and gave me a nod and a wink, and then he made a triangle with his thumbs and forefingers and looked at me through it with his right eye.
Just our little secret, he said. Not even half the people I work with know about that.
And AC, does he know?
AC knows a lot more than he's letting on, OJ said. But no, he don't know that. God knows what he'd think if he did. He went to school with OJ, played football with OJ, even lived with him for a while there. Probably it'd break his...
Wait, I said. The way you're talking about OJ is as though you're talking about another person. Do you mean...
Yeah, he said. I didn't take over OJ till about 93. He'd served his purpose by then. But we already knew he would be an incredibly useful vessel.
That was the year before the murders, I said, thinking finally we'd get to the bottom of that and hear it straight from the juicer's mouth.
I'll tell you the truth there, he said. That wasn't me. I swear to you it wasn't. The whole thing was staged, a ritualistic murder orchestrated for a much grander purpose than you can ever imagine. In many ways, I was the sacrificial lamb, a modern-day Jesus charged for no crime other than telling the truth and being what I am. And much like Jesus' first coming, it was an episode designed to polarize mankind and split father from mother, brother from sister, cousin from next-door neighbor. It asked the question of the world, which side are you on? Same with Hitler, same with Trump. Occasionally these great or not-so-great souls come to earth with that purpose in mind, and each individual decides and demonstrates who they are in relation to the messages and the values they offer. Do you stand for it, or do you oppose it? Do you follow and assist, or do you shoot down or ignore? Do you put yourself in danger for what is obviously right, or do you choose self-preservation and security? In general, the world simply turns and people get on with it. But once in every generation you are forced to answer the question posed by a Hitler, a Jesus, an OJ, or a Trump.
You know Trump? I said.
I know him well, he said, but he knows me not. And guy's a fucking imbecile. But he serves his purpose too. He plays his role in the progress, and there's no way it could be anyone other than him. They don't come out of nowhere, these souls, these polarizing forces. They are born out of the collective consciousness, an amalgamation of all the souls and minds everywhere.
That's wild, I said, looking up as we pulled into another station. Hey, I said, did you notice that
all the souls and minds everywhere, he said, equals all the same? Yes, well spotted. Your mind is becoming sharper. That's what will happen the longer you spend time with me and the more my vibration rubs off on you.
Well, how long till we get to where we're going, I said.
Just long enough, he smiled. Now ask your next question. I can feel you still have plenty you're curious about.
I looked at this smiling OJ with his smart clothes and pleasant demeanour, and it was difficult to remember that he was actually an upper echelon member of our shape-shifting space-livered overlords, plotting God only knows what, and still claiming responsibility for the Twin Towers massacre and debacle. So much had happened so fast, and yet I'd taken it on board with remarkable ease. So remarkable, in fact, that I wondered if maybe I hadn't been spiked somewhere along the way, perhaps in one of those drinks I'd glugged at the underground party. Certainly things had gone a bit weird since then. How tired I'd become, and the hazy memory of seeing Rachel again. And I suddenly remembered my younger days smoking pot in a room full of monged-out strangers, and no one saying anything, except to occasionally mumble, "What? Oh, I thought you said something. Oh, what? Oh, I didn't say anything. Oh, what?" Over and over and over again. I glanced at OJ looking placidly out of the windows and wondered if I'd hallucinated the whole conversation. He looked nothing like a trans-dimensional space lizard. He looked like a simple-headed black dude with a brain full of dumb weird thoughts of crimes he for some reason believed he'd get away with, even though he clearly wouldn't. How had I got here? Was I even here? Or was I maybe still tripping on acid, age 22, my body on a California beach, my hands circling endlessly in the sand, but my mind off in fantasy realms, a whole 19 years' worth of hallucinations, and quite a lot of it kind of humdrum and plain, and involving toilets and sleep and reading books and watching TV. Probably I would come down soon and be back on that beach. It would be nice to be 22 again, to start the whole thing over and try to avoid the mistakes of my hallucinatory life so that I didn't end up sitting on an underground train with OJ Simpson heading for Area 51. Still, there was always the possibility that it was real, and that the nagging sense I'd felt my entire existence, that there was more to life than meets the eye, that something was being hidden from me, and that society and everyone in it had been gaslighting me since I was a babe pooping in my pants, had proved itself true, and I was now being made privy to the planet's deeper secrets. Was I a chosen one? But why had they chosen me? And why, out of all the rubbish writers in the world, had OJ swooped down on a self-confessed failure, living a silly little life 5,000 miles away, when he could have had AC walk into any coffee shop in California and taken his pick of literally thousands of fruits and nuts and self-obsessed lunatic scribblers and nobodies like me? And what on earth was to become of this so-called book now? How would it ever get published? It was mad, wasn't it? And not what he'd wanted at all. Plus too incriminating and revealing. The truth far too much of a shock for the straight edge and humdrum. Life is about work and pensions and buying things to replace the things we bought before, people of this world. I snapped out of my reverie and asked him about it. "Oh, for sure," he said. "You're still going to publish it, and you're still the perfect man for the job. I wanted an English writer because the world respects your voices and accents more, and I've always had a fondness for the way you spell certain words and use quaint terms like bollocks and nappies. Plus the whole purpose of the book is for me to get it off my chest. I still have human feelings, you know.
And that purpose will be served, no matter how much you talk about yourself or go off on silly tangents. In fact, it's better like that since, and here's the kicker and what I've known right from the start, there's not a single soul on the planet who will believe a word of it anyway. He laughed. He laughed real pleased with himself, all the way until a tear fell from his eye. Honestly, he said, that's just the best. You got thousands and maybe millions of people out there suspecting all these things, and here I am getting you to reveal the absolute truth, not only about 9/11, but about way more besides, and not a soul on this planet will believe you, even if it's what they've been suspecting for years. You've written the whole story of our first contact and how you made your way here, and written it in a way that's so obviously realistic and true, and everyone who reads it will simply assume you made the whole thing up. I'm going to tell you everything, confess the lot, in a language so plain any child or fool can understand it, and all they'll do is laugh at you and call it a fiction. But my soul will be absolved, and I'll be able to meet my maker knowing I did the right thing. The fact that you spent half the book talking about yours and various other people's bumholes, as you call it, is neither here nor there. All your hogging of the pages leaves more room for the sequel and whets the public's appetite for more details. We can draw it out more and generate more interest and income, though, as I'm sure you've gathered by now, income, unlike what I told you in the beginning, isn't exactly a concern for me, though it clearly is for you. So it was never about the money then, I said. Oh, hell no, he said. You've seen a little of what I got going on, and that's not even a fraction of 1% of it. You just wait till you see the whole picture. But if I tell you, well, you look up in the sky and you see that old International Space Station, that's mine. Maybe that gives you a little idea of what I got going on. So, no, the money's all yours, and you can quote me on that, even if you one day get some dipshit lawyers coming after you, supposedly in my name, and... Oh, shit, he said, interrupting himself. He looked down the carriage and then ducked back into his seat. It's a ticket, Inspector, and I forgot my wallet. Talking of money, you got any on you? Not a dime, I said. AC's been paying for everything since I landed. The sushi, the subway, the breakfast and snacks, the motel and masseuse. I don't even have my bank card on me. That's back in the Bronco. But how much do I need? Well, it's only $250, OJ said. Well, this guy's a real hard ass. I think I'll be okay, but you better find some cash quick. Go and ask that girl over there. He indicated a pretty woman chatting to her friend. I can't do that, I said. She'll think I'm a... Tickets, please, said the inspector. It was too late. He was upon us. So what it is, OJ said, is that I forgot my wallet, and I had my pass in there, and... The inspector harumphed and frowned and slowly shook his head. He was a stout, grumpy-looking fellow with greenish skin. He reminded me of one of the old Gamorrean Star Wars figures I wished I still had. OJ, he said, how many times have I told you that you need to have your pass? This is, the third time this month. There's nobody else forgets their pass as often as you do. You're lucky, I know you, and know when it expires, too. But you'd be for it if it was one of the other guys. I ought to throw you off at the next stop, make you go back and get it. I know, OJ said, looking sheepishly down. I'm an idiot. I'd forget my head if it wasn't glued on. In fact... Yes, said the inspector, one grumpy eyebrow raised, as though he was daring OJ to fill his time with an anecdote he had no reason to hear. No, nothing, OJ said, growing quiet as a mouse. It was so peculiar to see this guy put in his place and rendered so small by a ticket collector. And suddenly it dawned on me. The whole thing was a ruse. He wasn't really a space lizard fella or a Freemason member of the secret rulers of the world. He was just an insecure old footballer living a fantasy life because his best days were long behind him, and he'd never been that bright or good at making decisions in the first place. Probably he did work at Area 51, but only as a janitor on a work release program from prison or something. And no doubt the whole lizard eye thing was just my tired mind playing tricks on me, and every time he seemed telepathic it was just plain old coincidence.
though how to explain the secret slide thing into the underground mansion, and this subterranean train system connecting brothels and military bases and airports.
"And you?"
said the ticket inspector, interrupting my thoughts.
"Ticket."
"Ah, I don't have one," I said. He stared at me furiously and did one of the neatest tricks I've ever seen in my life. A mass of blood instantly rushed to his green face and turned the whole thing beetroot red. His eyes bulging out of their sockets and the veins in his forehead standing out as profusely as the veins on Ron Jeremy's.
"What?"
he bellowed.
"How the fuck are you here on my train without a ticket? You know full well you have to buy one before you board. And you know too what the penalty for riding without one is."
He moved his hand to grab something behind his back. In the seat next to me, OJ cowered and made the universal signal for "he's not with me," as well as the universal facial expression for "oh shit," and I wondered what the fuck was going on. It was only a $2.50 fare. Surely it wasn't that big a deal. And yet here was the inspector, screaming at me apoplectic and pulling something unknown from behind his back. And if there was one thing I knew, it was that when people pulled unknown things from behind their backs, someone usually ended up dead. Sure enough, it was a spiked club, the sort of thing I might have expected an ogre or troll to lumber along with through a swamp.
"What's that sign say?"
he roared at me, pointing to a small label above the window. I squinted my eyes and read. "A valid ticket must be purchased before boarding," I said. "Failure to do so will result in being immediately clubbed to death by the ogre guard, though a current password and corresponding numerical value will suffice."
"So,"
said the ticket inspector, who I now, with the aid of the sign, realized was also an ogre.
"Do you have a valid ticket or not?"
He mashed the club a few times in his mighty calloused palm and started counting.
"1,
he said.
2,
he said.
3,
he said. How many are you counting to?" I said.
40,
he said. "Oh," I said, shrugging my shoulders, "that's loads of time." I emptied the contents of my pockets on the table in front of me and sifted through them. A couple of packets of mayonnaise from the Subway, a box of condoms from the brothel, my toothbrush and toothpaste, my passport, a chamomile and ginger tea bag from the motel in Boise, a Polaroid photo of some football scores from 1987, a small but crucial part of a time machine. And then, there it was, a piece of paper with the names of 3 men I'd never heard of on one side, and a weird cipher written by Julia Roberts on the other. "Something about this bit of paper," I said to OJ. "Lovely Rachel said it would come in handy, and I think the time is now."
16,
said the ogre/inspector.
17, he said. 18.
I furrowed my brow and scratched my head and squinted my eyes and turned it every which way I could think of.
"Hurry up,"
said a still-cowering OJ.
"He's going to say 23 soon." 23,
said the ogre, and
24.
I closed my eyes and went into my special place. Something about the whole password thing made sense to me, but I couldn't put my finger on where I'd seen it or what it meant. Had I forgotten? Was it in some long-ago dream? Was it even from this lifetime? Or could it have been in some other lifetime? Or what it was from this lifetime but a different timeline, as though another version of me in a parallel universe had seen it, had lived it, and was now desperately trying to send me the information I needed to escape death by Spiky Club. And if you don't pick up on that, that's a callback to the whole choose-your-own-adventure bit. And again, this whole thing depends on which way you go, but it kind of works whichever way you go. Anyway, back to the story. Whatever it was, whether it was lost in memory, or whether it was being transmitted into the ether from some other dimension, I needed to access it fast.
31,
said the inspector.
32,
he said. 30. I let everything go. I shrugged my shoulders and accepted my fate. After everything I'd been through these past 50-odd hours, it didn't seem that big a deal that I might meet my end here, clubbed to death on a secret underground train sitting next to either OJ Simpson or a shape-shifting alien space lizard, or both, all for her not having a $2.50 train ticket. Quite fitting, really. And then all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, it came to me. I knew what the password was, knew it in my bones, and the password was mumble mumble. And checking the cipher, I saw that each letter of the password had a numerical value, and that M's was 9.25, 4 M's in mumble mumble, so
37,
said the guard. Thank you, I said. And U equals 11, and B equals 7, and L equals -12, and
38,
he said. 39. 73, I blurted, excited and thrilled and relieved. The password is mumble mumble, and the numerical value is 73.
4,
The inspector began, raising his mighty club high in the air. 74, shouted OJ, throwing himself across me and holding his arm up towards the inspector's club.
It's 74.
Oh shit, I thought. He's right. I've gone wrong somewhere and missed one. Better recheck my sums and do the whole thing again. So M equals 9.25 and 74, I shouted, just as the ogre was about to commence with the second and presumably, as far as I was concerned, final syllable of the final number of his countdown.
Gee,
he said.
Oh, you got it. Well done.
And off he ambled down the carriage, pleasant as you like, his club back to swinging from his waist, and OJ and I sweatily collapsing into our seats. I closed my eyes, and in the screen of my mind I saw Rachel's gorgeous shining face grinning at me. She gave me a wink, and I swear I heard what sounded like the ting of a triangle. A red heart surrounded her. Her smile grew bigger and broader and more beautiful, and my own actual heart was filled with an incredible sense of warmth and tingling and love. The ogre turned back to me and gave me a hard stare for several seconds. Then he spoke.
She's the one,
he said, with a look in his eye that suggested he didn't even know what he was saying. And back he went to harassing the passengers and making sure they'd paid their $2.50, and boy, I sure hoped for their sakes that club stayed right where it was. Chapter 113.
We still got more time, said OJ, if you got more questions. I can only imagine what you got going on in your brain.
I thought for a moment and shook my head. Actually, I said, I can't think of anything right now. It all seems pretty clear and straightforward. Everything that came before was merely to bring us to this moment, and whether it was true or false, whether it even happened or was something I hallucinated or dreamed, is impossible to tell. And even if you swear that what you're saying is true, there's no way I can verify that, and there's no way I can be sure that what I'm hearing is true, or whether I'm hearing it properly or whether I'm just imagining it. So I'm a bit like, I shrugged my shoulders, I guess I'll just wait and see. OJ looked at me somewhat taken aback.
You don't want to know why we're going to Area 51? It's world famous, you know, he said.
Yeah, I've heard of it, but probably rather than you telling me what we're going to do there, and then us doing it, I figure it's better if we just live it and then I report on it after. Otherwise, I'll be writing the same thing twice. So, no, for the purpose of this little bit, I'm quite happy to take it as it comes. OJ shook his head, and from the look on his face, I could tell he hadn't really understood what I was saying.
He said. You're not even a little bit curious? After all, we only met about 35 minutes ago. That was when you still thought I was a prisoner who lived his days in a tiny cell with a stainless steel potty in the corner and fucked men's asses of an evening. Lots changed since then. And you just sit there like we're on the 405 driving to work like any other day.
I pondered, and I realized something that had probably always been true about me, but that I'd never had a reason to put into words. I think what it is, I said, is that I've always just been a bit of a go-with-the-flow kind of guy, and somehow had a gift for accepting whatever was going on in front of me. As, you know, it's just like, that's the thing that's currently occurring. It doesn't matter what it is. Like this one time, a guy in Spain pulled a gun on me, and I just stood there staring at him and thinking, okay, so here's a guy with a gun. I wonder what'll happen next. I figured the best thing I could do was just relax and make sure I wasn't getting uptight in my body or my mind, and I don't know, maybe it freaked him out a bit, because he just stared at me, and then after a while he apologized and walked away. To be honest, more than anything, I was more bored by the whole thing and wanted him to get a move on, you know, one way or another. And I guess the point is I don't generally get too excited by much. Another time I thought I saw like a UFO land in front of me. It wasn't, but I thought it was, and that makes my reaction real. And I just thought, oh, look, aliens, I wonder what they'll do. I didn't scream or whoop or say, oh my God, 400 times like an American would do. I just looked at it and waited. I don't know, maybe there's something wrong with me. That's the way I am. Many's the time I've expected the whole fabric of reality to come sliding to the ground like a curtain fall, and instead of all this physical stuff like chairs and bodies and cups, there'd be nothing but light, and I'd be like, yeah, that's what I thought it was. And then I shrugged my shoulders. It's weird being me. Sometimes I feel like a movie camera just floating through the world that people walk up to and say things at and then walk away. But there I go again, talking about myself. What were you saying? I forgot. Also, I said, I thought there'd be water on this train. I'm spitting feathers here. Yeah, sorry, Limey, I was going to buy you a bottle from the dining car, but I forgot my wallet. But if you go to the restroom, the tap water there's drinkable, kind of. There's a dining car, I said. Oh, maybe they'll give me some free hot water. I've got this tea bag from the motel we stayed at in Boise. That'll go down nicely. OJ laughed at me and shook his head. I smiled. Something funny, man? I said. OJ sighed and just looked at me, beaming. You, he said, you're what's funny. You're sitting on a train with the greatest running back in history, heading for the world's most mysterious military base, long rumored to contain alien technology. And instead of thinking about what we might get up to when we get there, you spend an entire chapter talking about pretty much nothing other than being thirsty and maybe making a cup of tea with this ratty old tea bag you've got stuffed in your back pocket, had it there for God knows how long. I'd say that's kind of amusing. Kind of boring if you ask me, I chuckled. But I am really thirsty. I gulped my poor throat and stood up to begin my search for water. But then a thought entered my head and I figured a question or two wouldn't hurt. Okay, I said, just tell me this then. Have they got spaceships there? You know, flying saucers and the whole Roswell thing? OJ pondered. He looked around him. He reverted to hushed tones. Spaceships, yeah, he said. As you understand them anyway. Roswell was obviously a military balloon. Any fool with half a brain can see that. Or maybe just the opposite. You'd have to be a half-brain fool to think it was anything other than a military balloon. Cool, I said. Will I get to see them? You will, he said. Will I get to fly one? I said, momentarily excited. OJ just laughed. You don't have access to enough dimensions, he said. Though you may get to do something even more interesting than that. They're just really fast airplanes at the end of the day. Novelty wears off soon enough. You've flown one, I said. Nah, he said, but I've been up in one. Though maybe up isn't the right word. It's difficult to describe in your three-dimensional earthly terms. And there's other alien technology there, I said. Oh yeah, he said, lots of it. Though again, your definition of alien may be different to mine. I like that conversation we had in the beginning of the book about swear words, about how it's all semantics and personal meanings, right? Man, that seemed like a long time ago. Something like that, he said. It's all about perspective, about the angle you're looking at something from, and about understanding that an individual's angle is defined by a great many things, and that the truth is generally somewhere in the middle. Okay, I said, so you got me curious. Let me go get my cup of tea, and then I want to hear all about what you've got in store for me there. But there was no time for either tea or plot spoilers, because according to the recorded voice of the woman that sounded over the train speakers, we were now approaching our final station stop, Area 51, where this train would terminate, and would all passengers please ensure that they take their belongings with them? Thank you. Not to worry, OJ said, standing up from his seat. You'll find out soon enough.